Welcome, Wargamers, to the bloody wastes of the Mortal Realms, because today we are doing another dive into the Nighthaunt Battle Tome to have a cool story that involves some Coronate warbands, a whole bunch of Free Cities folks, as well as, of course, the Nighthaunt army themselves. This is one of those small isolated tales that comes from the timeline portion of the Nighthaunt Battle Tome. And these are wonderful windows into all of the various factions and how they interact throughout the Mortal Realms, because it is such a vast place and there are so many different competing motivations and goals and missions and objectives and all these other things. So we're going to read that story and then have a great discussion about it and then ultimately ask the question, why is this cool? What does this add to Warhammer? But right before we get into that, I do want to give a shout out to my sponsor, which is Not Just Gaming. It's a wonderful game store on the East Coast. If you use that link in the description down below, you'll save yourself 30% on all Games Workshop purchases, as well as going a long way to supporting me and the channel. It's an affiliate link. I do get a part of it at no cost to you. You save money, I make money. A massive thank you to everyone who has used that link to now. With that out of the way, let's talk about today's story, Red Vengeance. The lands of Kull's Ravage are stained by lakes of blood, split over the course of the Age of Chaos. Hundreds of thousands of souls have died there over the years, for it is a realm where the curse of Khorne runs hot. And yet, against all omens and warnings, the Dawnbringer Crusades, known as the Reclaimers, venture further and further south, fighting off small warbands of bloodbound every day for long weeks. In the process, they are whittled down to next to nothing, bled dry by the sheer scale of the ravage. Each night, they hear a strange, unsettling laughter, interspersed with screams and cries for help, that a brave few try to answer, only to find strange red phantoms, half visible under the light of Aqshy's 3 moons. When the caravan makes a last stand against their blood-bound persecutors, blood runs thick across the site of the Brimstone massacres. At the peak of the battle, red-robed Geist rise in the thousands, using the shimmering pools of split gore as a portal to translocate from Shyistian underworlds. At first, the bloodbound cry in jubilation, thinking this visitation to be some Coronate demon, but their mistake is soon revealed. Over the course of the harrowing hour, the Nighthaunt slaughter all of the bloodbound before approaching the Dawnbringers in whispering parley. Ashen-faced, the Crusaders head back north to Fort Denst the very next morning. A lot of interesting little tidbits within this story. The first off is the actual setting. If you're not familiar or you weren't around when Age of Sigmar first started, the plains of Aqshy, known as Kull's Ravage, were actually a very prominent location way before Gur is now, and then of course Shyish, the Soul Wars before it. In the beginning, we were all about Aqshy, Ghiran, and Chaman. But I think we can all agree, Chaman kind of got put on the shelf for a bit, and Ghiran and Aqshy were really the center stage for most of the pivotal events in early Age of Sigmar history. Now, Kull's Ravage, there's a whole backstory about the Realm of Fire and how it fell to Khorne and kind of the primordial angers and civilizations, some that were highly advanced, some that were very primal. That kind of governing structure all collapsed, and now it's just roving bands of murderers. In fact, it's called Kull's Ravage because Korgus Kull, the preeminent mighty lord of Khorne that we followed in the early Age of Sigmar setting, his clan conquered all of it, and he had a bloodbound army that was continental-sized. Like when those early books talk about the Stormcast initially dropping down to Azir to open the first gate, they're describing it as like this untenable horror. His territories take up the vast swath of what we as players know as being the Realm of Fire. Of course, it's just one continent, but of course, there's a whole lot more to the realm, but it's a huge section. So it's not unreasonable to think that the Dawnbringer Crusade we're following would have left from Hammerhall Aqshy or one of its sort of satellite cities. Not just because it's in Aqshy, but it's specifically in a very well-established and probably well-defended section of it. Now, here's a thought about the Dawnbringer Crusades. In the book Dominion by Darius Hinks, where we follow one of these crusades, their particular leader has like a vision from Sigmar, and she kind of leads them down this course. Now, I'm not sure it's been confirmed if every single Dawnbringer crusade has this divine inspiration kind of a course, but regardless, however they were managing this, they were told multiple times, you do not want to go into Kull's Ravage. Like, I don't know where you're being sent, but you don't want to go that way through it. And they're like, nope, God says south, we head south. And as expected, as they're traveling, when we think about a Chaos Army, it's not just, Warhammer Total War teeming masses of tens of thousands of dudes that just rush forward. It's not necessarily like that. To conquer a region, sometimes it's just warbands that are kept in line by brutal tyrants that, have more and more power the higher up in rungs you go. And so they might only be taking on, 20, 30, maybe a couple hundred max bloodbound at any given time. And I would love to see this caravan's moving defensive technique or structures or something, because you would have to plan for that. That's a real rapid deployment of troops and arms and everything. So I think it would be a really cool visual if there was a picture of this. And it does say that the whole time they're headed down south, things are getting weird. They start hearing whispers. There was this one little line in there that I didn't really quite click with me, is just that they would hear people calling for help. Some of the Free City people would go out there looking, and they would see kind of apparitions, but nothing concrete, nothing to actually help. It was just that's weird. And you know what, dude? It is weird. That's a weird thing. But there just becomes a point where we just don't have the manpower to keep moving forward while also defending ourselves, so that's where you get this last stand situation, which honestly, as we're talking about these awesome, 3-battle short stories, I mentioned this for the Arcane Cataclysm video, it's almost like one of these Battletome stories blown up into missions. This is perfect, absolutely perfect for a small 2-player campaign. In fact, let me know in the comments, should I make one for Warcry? Because I am working on a Warcry packet right now for this kind of a thing. But mission 1 could be defending the wagons, Free City players, I say Free City, it's just order, right? Whatever you want, order. Going up the center strip as a caravan, and then bloodbound guys coming at it from the sides, and the next mission could be the Last Stand, where now the Free Cities have a block in the center that's theirs, and now they're completely surrounded. And then the third mission represents the next part of our story, which is things get really, really rough. Now, in this part of Aqshy, lakes of blood are not uncommon. It's just a thing that Korgoskul does. He's reaping all them skulls and making all these tributaries for Khorne. And we've seen in early Age of Sigmar lore, specifically, The Gates of Azir, I think was one of the first books. It was a moment in that where a bloodletter comes up out of a pool of blood. So it's not crazy that when they start to see the blood start moving at the height of battle, for them to think, oh yeah, Khorne has blessed us by sending some of his personal warriors, the demons, to help us. If not help us, at least revel with us in all this slaughter. But instead, of course, it is the Nighthaunt. Now, it's not specifically said that these are the Scarlet Doom. However, that is how the Scarlet Doom are described. It means it could apply to a bunch of different Nighthaunt hosts, but really what this is, instead of using realm gates to travel, the Nighthaunt who have died the most heinous and slaughtered deaths, whose bodies have been defiled the way that Khorne warriors do by cannibalism, skull trophies, that kind of thing. These spirits now use puddles of blood to go through from different points of the realms. So arising from these lakes of blood instead of demons are Nighthaunt that are essentially the Scarlet Doom, but not given that name. And now at this point, the third mission in our little fictional thing could be the reversal, where there's a huge concentration of Nighthaunt and Free Cities in the center, and not nearly enough bloodbound to take them on. Again, these are skirmishing forces, and what we're describing with the Nighthaunt is a standing army uses this as a gateway. And one touch I did like is that at the end, once all the slaughter is done, the Nighthaunt, instead of murdering our Dawnbringer Crusades, kind of just come in and parlay. It means they're just going to talk, they're just going to negotiate. Now, after that negotiation, Dawnbringer Crusade heads back north, meaning they're going home. And so here's my question, what did the Nighthaunt say? Because, and part of my brain really wants it to be just a nice Midwestern kind of it's a bit dangerous around here. You should probably head back north. Basically copy paste the same warning that everyone's given them so far, except it took an army of undead breaching around their own dead bodies to figure out that that's probably a good idea. The other side could be the Nighthaunt saying, if there is this Dawnbringer character at the top who's basically running the show, hey, your vision was to bring us here to unleash us to avenge our own deaths. Your prophecy is no longer needed. Go home, kind of a thing. I think that could be an equally compelling story, because it also brings to question a lot of the motivations behind Dawnbringer Crusades, who is sending the visions. does Sigmar have exclusive control over it? That would be a super cool idea, I think. Imagine if, I mean, not even thinking like forces of chaos necessarily, but just other deity level characters. If Gorka Morka could influence people to go on a Dawnbringer crusade because he wanted an army there for his band of ogres to eat, like he would give them a false reading. I don't know. This is all speculation. We don't actually know what the Nighthaunt guy said to him, but whatever it was, made him give up his, half religious, part political crusade to establish a new place and go home, like everybody else said. The more important thing here that we can conclude, though, is that they were not hostile, which is interesting coming from the Soul Wars, where it just seemed like death just could not work with anyone except for Flesh Eater courts. That was kind of the caveat there. But Nighthaunt, just like, their battle tome reeks of like, they hate the living so much that you would think that they would just slaughter everybody. But things are complicated, I mean, that's kind of what feeds into my idea that they planted the seed of getting this blood lake going, and that's why it was a false vision, because they didn't kill them. You did what we wanted you to do. I don't know. Again, it's just a theory. I'm going to lay off it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Did the Nighthaunt or Nagash or somebody seed the idea for this Dawnbringer crusade to bring them here to unleash these ghosts? That's my theory, because it has a lot of implications if yes. Also, one thing I want to point out is that the fort that they turn backwards towards is called Fort Denst, and the Van Denst is a very prominent family in Age of Sigmar lore from the Broken Realm series. That's the father and daughter duo who are Soulblight vampire hunters. Interesting that the named fort is here rather than Gur when his notable deeds that we know of were accomplished. Or it could be the other way around, right? Denst could have been a long family name, and then this fort existed in Aqshy, and then they just happened to end up in Gur carrying the title, but it was an interesting, connection nonetheless. And so backing out of it, why is this story so cool, right? This is my favorite part of all these videos. Instead of just going over the actual story beats, kind of contextualizing it a bit within the setting. Quite simply, I love when factions interact. Anytime one of these little stories has more than 2 armies in it, like mentioned, I get really excited, because in this case we have Nighthaunt, Bloodbound, or Khorne, Blades of Khorne is the army, and a Dawnbringer crusade, Cities of Sigmar. And that whole discussion we just had about, did the Nighthaunt seed the thought or the vision to come release them? All of those things are possible, and they do happen within the Age of Sigmar universe. That these very intricate plans where everyone is trying to play a long con to get someone into a vulnerable position to be able to attack them or use them, like all those things are happening simultaneously. Whether it's Neferata manipulating nation states to get, human cattle or whatever she needs for her vampires. Whether it's the Bad Moon arriving at just the right location at the right time for the wrong city kind of a deal. Like all these little plans and machinations are all happening in different ways. And so this is a situation where the Nighthaunt wanted to kill the Khorne warriors, but did not want to kill the Free City people. And I'm like, that is a very interesting relationship to highlight. It's very easy to look at all the various armies and think that they're all very much out for themselves and that everyone else is an enemy, and to some extent that's generally true, especially with chaos stuff. But it's those interactions between armies where they have respect for one another, or just are able to have some kind of dialogue that where it's like, this is so interesting because they're approaching these conversations in such various ways that always makes for the best storytelling, in my opinion. The fact that we can have a conversation and debate what the Nighthaunt guy said to him and the reasons why and the evidence for, like, that's interesting. It adds vibrancy to the setting, and that's just not a bad thing. But anyway, friends, those are my thoughts on the Red Vengeance. Again, not officially name dropped as the Scarlet Doom, but they do the Scarlet Doom trick of coming up through blood puddles, which, let's be honest, is pretty baller. You'd think they'd spend a lot of time in Aqshy. Let me know your thoughts on my theory regarding the Dawnbringer Crusade's prophecy vision, why they got there, and what the conversation was about that sent them politely excusing themselves and going home through Kull's Ravage. I'd love to see your thoughts down below. I will read them back. Thank you so much for watching, listening, and I'll catch you in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Happy wargaming.